we're going to talk a lot about feelings in this next presentation. So when you think about change, how do you feel? So just write a few words in the chat. When you think about change, what comes to mind? Maybe somebody could tell me what some words are coming up.
We've got nervous, excited, adventure, adapt, opportunity, uncertainty, fun, fear, needed, challenge, jazz,
Okay.
growth.
Cool.
Growth.
Yeah. So, you know, the thing about change is, first of all, it's like both of these things, right? When there are some people, when they hear the word change, mostly designers, are like, yeah, jump in, right? And then there's those people who look at change and they're like scared to death. They're really afraid of change. And now in today's world, we're going through this myriad of emotions. It almost feels like simultaneously. I think it's like, I wake up some days really depressed, and then I wake up other days incredibly optimistic. So there's this like wave of emotion that change is bringing upon us. And I saw in the chat that somebody was talking about the stages of grief. And that's kind of exactly what's going on for us right now. You know, different people handle change differently at different times in their life. And this is a slide that John Maeda actually created from a conversation that we had about the stages of transition in life. And, you know, John Maeda is like my spirit animal. So I was so like happy to see this in the most current CX report. But, you know, the very first stage of any kind of change is you go through, it's a form of death. And with that change, it's, you go through these stages of grief. And it very much mimics kind of when I look at these waves, these wave lines going above the line where I'm optimistic and below the line where I'm in shock and denial. Every day feels like this. I feel like that, you know, since this has started, I've been going through these bumps, highs and lows. And we're not even in acceptance yet, right? So I think, you know, you're going to go through, and you might get to acceptance, and then you might go right back to shock. And so this is the natural state of change. The way we are feeling right now is exactly the way we should be feeling. This is entirely a normal emotion or wave of emotions. A couple of years ago, I left my job at Autodesk, kind of got pushed out. And I went through this wicked like shock to my system. And I read this book called Transitions by this guy, William Bridges. And he talked about these 3 stages of transition. And again, he talked about this first stage being feeling of death. Now, any kind of transition, whether it's good news or bad news, whether you're having a baby or getting married or somebody died or people are sick, all of those signal death because we are grieving what we know to be normal. We are grieving the life that we had lived. And frankly, that's kind of what we're going through right now. We are going through this grieving process of the life that we have lived. And again, we're in those stages. We really haven't come out of it yet. But then once you get through the stages of grief, the next stage is what I call introspection. And the way I look at it is your body's in a coffin lying above ground and you're just kind of hanging out there and you don't know when you're gonna when your soul is gonna rise. And this is a phase where you are really, you've accepted the change, but you don't really know what to do with it yet. You have it, you're confused. It might feel really cloudy. And it's not a very comfortable place to be because you have no real clarity what your next step's going to be. And that second wave is could last for a long time. There's no timestamp on any of these phases. For me, my introspection phase lasted about 1.5 years. And then something happens. Something happens in that phase where you start getting these sparks of ideas. You start getting motivated and inspired, and you realize that there's this new path in life. And that's kind of what I call resurrection. But you could call it whatever you want, but those are those stages of transition that we are all going to go through during this pandemic. And in thinking about this and, going through the ups and downs where there's incredible grief and sadness about, our community and the inequities that Andrew talked about in his the first presentation. There's tremendous sadness and people are suffering, but what I am optimistic about is crisis is a form of creativity. And when I was running my own business, I remember going through 3 major downturns. Nothing like this pandemic, can't compare. But I remember in 2008 when the financial crisis hit. And Rahm Emanuel, who's the mayor of Chicago, said this quote, which always stuck with me: never let a serious crisis go to waste. It's an opportunity to do things you think you could not do before. And so I think about this, and I think about how, crisis is really a form of redesign. And what I am so humbled and excited and inspired by is just this month alone. This has been like a month, maybe 6 weeks for some of us on this call. The rise of creativity and generosity of spirit and connection to humanity is overwhelmingly inspiring and motivating. And I don't know about you, but I feel more connected to my friends and family than ever before. This crisis has brought us together. No, I can't hug them, but Zoom somehow enables us to actually, if you think about it, we all have an equal square. So in a lot of ways, we are all considered equal on Zoom. And then you see people like Wendy McNaughton, who teaches drawing classes to kids every weekday. And you see people making masks and sharing those patterns online. And then, seeing Italy come out every night and play music and drink wine with their neighbors. Or in Spain, where they're clapping for healthcare workers at 7:00 every night. Or, the symphony and concerts being performed virtually. And then people who are stepping up with GoFundMe accounts to fund people who are out of work. This is the stuff that gets me up at night. This is the stuff where I can see crisis becoming an amazing moment of creativity. So crisis is a redesign. And even though we're still in the first phase, which is death, and we're coming and we're bumping up and down, we are starting to see systems die, which requires us to redesign them. And in a lot of ways, a lot of these systems, the systems that we consider normal and broken, would never get redesigned if it wasn't for this crisis. It would, I think of climate change, for example. The animals are coming out. The people have left the planet, are no longer outside, so all the animals are coming out. So we are seeing systems die so new systems can be reborn. And Jason touched on this beautifully in his talk. And then we can now treat everything as if it's a design problem. This is our superpower. A couple of years ago, I wrote a book, co-authored a book with Christopher Ireland called Rise of the DEO. DEO is the Design Executive Officer. And this was very early on. It was from a TED Talk I gave in 2011. And in that talk, I talked about the rise of this new generation of leaders who are going to have this combination of creative thinking and doing matched with intense and business acumen. So it's this combination of a strategic business person with a creative thinker. And I hypothesized at the time that we are going to see more and more leaders who are going to be combining creativity and business acumen. And I outlined these qualities that DEOs have, which are qualities that we designers have. Being an agent for change, having the ability and desire to take risks, thinking about systems instead of solving problems linearly at a time, being intensely people-centered, not only for our families, but our communities, our coworkers, our customers. We care about people. Our strong abilities to combine analysis, analytical thinking with gut-centered intuition. And finally, our capacity to get shit done. And these qualities still hold up for design leaders today. We all have these superpowers. But now I'm starting to think more deeply about leaders and role models. And I am so blown away by these heroes that are stepping up in times like this. And I think about those skills, and I look at today's leaders, and I look at these heroes, the grocery workers, the delivery drivers, the nurses, the doctors, all of these people who are stepping up, the new creative leaders, and they're becoming our new role models. So I want you to take a moment and think about those leaders, and maybe in the chat, you can type in a couple of qualities that you are noticing from today's leaders and role models during the crisis. And then maybe if somebody could read those qualities, that would be great.
Not paid enough, earnest. Go ahead, Patrick, you want to take it?
Go, Bern.
Vulnerable, resilient, empathetic, honesty, putting others first. What's really essential, empathy again. David calls out Cuomo's voice, selfless, proactive.
So I want you to think about those qualities. These are the qualities that today's leaders have. And these are the qualities that we need in our leaders right now. And these are going to be the qualities that are going to carry those new leaders forward as we get out of this crisis. And I'm working on another book project called Changemakers. And you know, I can't really see the bottom of my screen. Who's the guy that I quoted from Ashoka? What's his name? Somebody tell me.
Bill Drayton.
That's right. Bill Drayton, right? He's the founder of Ashoka. And I've been looking at today's leaders before the crisis hit, and especially leaders like designers in companies, design leaders, but more specifically looking at these new qualities of people who are stepping into old systems and having to enact change at scale. And he came up with this so I saw that he identified this new breed of leaders, and he identified them as change makers. And this is the definition that he wrote for these change makers: people who see the patterns around them, identify the problems in any situation, figure out ways to solve the problem, organize fluid teams, lead collective action, and then continually adapt as situations change. I don't know about you, but this sounds an awful lot what we have been trained to do for a living, right? And the key word here is adapt. Continually adapt as situations change. That's what this is the gift that this crisis has given us. The gift that this crisis has given us is the ability for the human race, for us, everybody in the collective community, to completely adapt as situations change in the moment. And this is where the creativity will be born. Now, if you are a change maker, you know, the great news is you have the capacity to have impact at scale. But the bad news is that inevitably you will fail. And failure really sucks. And if you don't fail, then you have failed, because then you haven't taken enough risks. So it's inevitable to fail, because then you know what the edge is, where the edge it is to push. I was talking to John Maeda about this because, you know, he has had a lot of different careers, some more successful than others. And he reminded me that failure is really easy. Recovery is hard. The recovery will be hard. But when you hit that lowest point, when we all hit those lows, and the pain feels almost unbearable, that's when creativity is born. And that's when it's time to redesign. So we have to rise up, and we have to stand up as creative leaders, as designers in times like this. We have to use our superpowers and adapt and help the human race move forward. And I know you're all going to be breaking into breakout rooms, so I wanted to leave you with some questions for your breakout room, because we all have the capacity to lead. So my questions for you today are: how will you choose to show up and lead for others during these challenging times? And then looking at each and every one of your superpowers, what is the one thing that you are willing to commit to that leverages your superpowers as a leader for today's world? And then finally, this is an amazing community, an amazing group of people who have the capacity to make great things happen for our family, our communities, our country, the world. So what is the collective dream that we should hold for this group of leaders tonight? So thank you for this. Remember, we all have a choice. All of us have a choice today. The change can passively happen to you, or change can proactively happen for you. Which choice will you have? Thanks so much, everybody.